Well, this month's challenge was a themed challenge titled Captivated. And the idea is to interpret that theme. You could interpret that narrowly or very broadly. Some folks interpreted that as captive rings. And that was something John Kelsey, I believe, demonstrated in the past few months. Is that correct, John?
I demoed it. Yeah, Barry's the one who did it for this, though. Yeah.
Um, and had demoed it. And so that certainly is one way to interpret it. But based on some of the pictures that were shared with me from this month's entries, I'm really excited for you to all see the range of projects that were turned in this month.
Doug, you ready to go?
So can you see Barry's picture now?
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Barry, before I start with you, I've got these in an order. I have to admit that somebody sent me a picture, or I saw a picture of somebody who had made a bowl with a heart embedded in the middle of the bowl that was carved in, and I can't for the life of me find it. So it's not in this club challenge, even though it was legitimately there. But anyway, so let's start off with Barry. I've got a couple. There's a couple here, Barry. This one and two views. Do you want to describe what you did?
Okay, I was at first leaning toward making captive rings on a goblet, and I never made a goblet before, and I didn't really want to. I want to make something different, and so I saw a sculpture on YouTube, and it gave me the idea of doing something like this. But it was just made from 3/4 inch thick by 4 inch wide maple board that was cut into round blanks and turned as individual rings on the lathe. And then two of them get broken in half along the short grain and looped through the others and glued back together again with regular type-on glue. And surprisingly, it doesn't, you don't see the glue joint. It really takes hard looking at to discover the glue joint. I was real happy with how it turned out.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Bob Mathers.
Yeah, I didn't see John's presentation on making these. I first was introduced to these by the gentleman that over at the college when we used to meet over at Thaddeus Stevens. And I was trying to make up my mind whether to buy the Sorby tool for the captive rings. And well, after going through this with the tools that I did have, I just purchased some Sorby tools there. My first design idea was to take the feathers on the back and make it like a heart. And I hope the message gets across though when I give it to my Valentine this February.
Okay, well we'll keep the picture. We'll keep the picture a secret then. Okay.
Thank you.
Bob, is that maple or what kind of wood is that?
I believe that's ash. It was just a tree that came down in my front yard. I think it was ash. I've been using that for a long time. Pieces from that.
Jolene, did I hear you say something?
Yeah, I just commented that I thought that was really clever.
Well, thank you.
Mike LeBeau sent me two pictures.
Yeah, this is a goblet with 3 rings on it. I made a number of these for different pastors that they use for weddings. And the 3 rings, of course, represent the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This one's made out of box elder. This is a small sample one that I used to show to different people.
We got a second picture here on the side. Is this what it looks like when it's empty?
Yes.
Could you go back one, Doug? So Mike, at the bottom ring,
Yes.
I'm looking at that and I can see some of that patterning in the wood is matching the foot.
Yes.
And I like that. A lot of times when we see the captive rings, the pattern of the wood doesn't necessarily carry through in such a thin slice. And I appreciate that detail, how you were able to keep that.
Thank you.
What did you, Mike, what'd you finish this with?
I just use friction polish
Good.
on this one. Some of the other ones I use something that's more food ready.
So with those loose rings, did you just do that friction polish by hand then? Not
Yeah.
when it's turning?
Yes.
Okay. Nice job.
Any
Yeah.
other comments for Mike? Mr. Kelsey.
Oh yeah, this is I captured my video camera. This is the first version. This was, let's see, version number roughly 3 in the series, and there's been one more after it. The point is to be able to get motion in at least one and maybe 2 axes like X and Y. Z, the camera has a zoom to take care of that, and then to be able to rotate on 3 axes, pitch, roll, and yaw. And if you can do that, you can point the damn camera at almost anything. And the camera itself has to be captivated pretty securely. So in earlier versions, the camera fitting itself was sometimes involved in the gimbal, and that kept coming loose. So there's kind of a guitar tuning peg in there that kind of helps lock that little thing right in place. So that's Captivated to capture images that we hope captivate you.
All right.
Maybe in the future you can make a ball and socket one, John.
That's coming up.
Barry, we expect you to make a fully mechanized one with all the motors and have bells and whistles so John can operate it remotely, but we weren't going to do that just yet. Okay, we're going to wait until you got your spiral jig finished.
Yeah. Full servo and stepper motor control. Absolutely.
Absolutely. This is another one of the images John sent me.
Well, that's another gizmo, actually. That actually has an
Oh.
XY slide with it with a custom fit wedge, and it works the gimbals a little bit differently. This is my current version. This is pretty versatile.
And you sent a couple of pictures too. I'm not sure what they were all
Well,
about.
Johnine said that it looked like a good example of prototyping, and I sort of laughed and said, yeah, well, there's some drawings involved, you know, and this is like me trying to figure out how the hell do I get 3 axes of motion and have the camera pointing where I want it to point. And then there's another one. And that's more typical. That's the kind of drawings I do all the time of what I'm trying to make, just so I know what the hell I'm trying to make. It doesn't have to be a good drawing.
Well, as long as you understand them, because I certainly don't.
Well, there you go.
Any questions for John? Jonine,
Oh my.
this is your series here. Do you want me to just slowly scroll through it, or you want to talk as you go? I got the video. I did that at the very end. Oh, I think just a second here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can just tell you about it, but I think this shape is very difficult to capture in a still image, which is why I included a video. So this is a streptahedron, and the form of streptahedron that I did was a bicone. So it's made from ash, and then I used liming wax on it. I thought the grain was such a strong grain that the liming wax, and very porous. So the ash really took the liming wax very well. And so very bold stripes in the wood grain with the liming wax. And then there were some imperfections in the wood. So I kind of strategically placed the surface embellishment through texturing. So I used some rotary burrs and then also some pyrography to sort of do like a lacy border in between the two to get some division. And I, if I was to do it again, I'd be much more planful about where I placed those holes. I just kind of was doing them, and I think I could have been much more intentional about their placement, where I was very careful about the placement of the rest of the embellishment. I wasn't as careful with the holes. But it's, you turn it as a bicone, it's split through the middle, and then you can open it. And so I put magnets on the 4 corners, but I oriented them so that they're only all in the proper orientation one way. Otherwise you could, because the corners really have to line up, and it only lines up really well one way. So I made sure that the magnets only all stick
Mm.
that way. And then I have 2 depressions, and that's where the little shells fit inside. And so the form was supposed to be reminiscent of a seashell, you know, with like that abalone iridescence to it. So
Mhm.
I used liming wax and I used acrylics. I used 3 colors. I used a very deep burgundy down in the bottom of the wells of the texturing. And then over top of that, I laid sort of like a jewel toned green. And then I used an iridescent, almost like a very translucent iridescent top coat that I used a foam brush and just touched the tops of the carved form to just give it that an iridescent look to it. I lime waxed the inside then as well.
Doug, can you come back a slide so we can see the top of the green?
Hang on a second. Actually, Mike, if you don't mind, this is the video of it.
Oh, cool. That's fine. Yeah, yeah, sure. Oh,
So
wow.
depending on the axis that you rotate it, you get a totally different look. So it's almost like 2 objects in one, which appealed to me. And then you can see, okay, so there I open it and ta-da, there are shells inside. Take those out. And then as you can see the bicone now. So if I put it that way, and then the design is the inverse, each half is an inverse design.
Wow.
So although it's together, see how it doesn't line up? And there's
Well
now
done,
it won't
yeah,
line
yeah.
up there. And so it'll line up like that.
Wow.
Wow.
And so
turn
it really wasn't very difficult. Doug, did you include the other pictures like the partway through
Yeah.
the
Yes, I've got those afterwards. I thought that I was trying to sort of do it in the sequence and I wasn't exactly certain how. Let me just make sure. No. Okay, Jonine, I put them.
We don't have to do that. We can do that some other time. I
No,
wanted to include the video just because it was really difficult to, I think, appreciate the form.
Yeah.
Still photographs. And I will say, so like the other thing I would do differently is on the inside here, the magnets I would have done last. So if I had to do it over again, I would do the magnets the very last thing, because it was really easy to get it junked up where the
Okay.
magnets are at.
He was 100.
How long did it take you to get the magnets oriented right?
Not long. And so the trick that I found is that you drill one side and put a magnet in it, and then you mate the other magnet on top of it. So the other magnet is sticking out.
Okay.
And then I put a little bit of paint at the end of that magnet
Oh, sure.
and then touch the 2 halves together. And then I know exactly where the other magnet then needs to be.
Okay.
Johnine, did you use CA or epoxy to hold these in?
I used CA just because I feel like I have a lot more control over the amount that I put in because it's in a dropper bottle.
Yeah, sure.
Although if I had my preference, I would have done it, using epoxy just because I think it's a lot more permanent.
That's really cool. That really is
Amazing.
very,
So,
very-
so Jonine, are you going to be willing to do a demonstration on this one of these times?
Yeah, I can do that.
If nothing else, just to get to the basic cone shape and whatever you've done.
It really wasn't difficult. I did this with spindle turning tools. So there was
Oh. That would be great. I think I have the more pictures on how you made it in the show and tell portion. Okay. Yeah. So we might come back at you, Matt.
So this was inspired by 2 different things. One is the sort of classic science experiment we've ever seen, putting a hard-boiled egg into a milk bottle, where you sit the egg on top and you have a fire inside. When the fire goes out, the air that is expanded then contracts and sucks the egg in. And that's not how I got the little vase in there. But the other thing it was inspired by is the arrow through a bottle, I don't know, puzzle, I guess you could call it, where you take basswood and you actually press the grain fibers and insert them through a hole in a glass bottle, and then re-inflate them with water or boiling water. So I was really intrigued with the idea of having a vase inside a vase. And so
There's three pictures
Matt, how did you do the shredding on the flour?
that was just turned with my diamond carbide tool as a shearing action on green wood. And it's just taking a small green branch and peeling it away like a peeling cut.
Thank you. That's really clever.
And there you can see it will not fall back out.
So what did you do to make it not fall back out again? Is it just because it was such a tight fit?
It's slightly larger than the opening, and I had originally tried steaming the wood to make it more pliable, make the grain pliable so I could press it in place. But that resulted in it actually expanded. So I baked it in a toaster oven for about 150 degrees for about 2 hours or so, and checking it for 15 minutes till it was completely dry, and then just pressed it in. And then once it reached its stable humidity level, any creases that had formed, any dents that had formed from pressing it in, puffed back out. So now it won't fall out.
Cool. So that's what you ended up with. That's cool. Dave Bleal, there's quite a few of the Christmas tree.
Oh, these really are just for show and tell.
Okay.
I didn't want, and I got the idea from Lynn Walker, Susquehanna, won the Christmas challenge up there. I just wanted to talk about them. This is basically for show and tell. They're boxes.
I thought they were captured Christmas trees.
Nothing captive inside.
Well, I can come back to them during show and tell if you want to, but Dave,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I can talk about an hour later. Doesn't matter.
Well, let's do it later. We'll keep on with the captive stuff. Ben Kaufman, this looks like an oil can.
Yeah, it's I guess a logger left it out in the woods and left it on a stump, and a tree grew around it. And I was looking at this log while I was turning, and all of a sudden this oil can I seen was captivated inside. So I thought, well, I gotta let it out.
Still attached.
Yeah. So
you're really good at reading wood.
Yeah. Michelangelo, here we come. Look out.
I love this, Ben.
Is that off center?
It's off center, and that was a challenging part.
Wow.
Of
fantastic.
Turning the spout that thin, because it was everything was off center.
Good for you. There you go.
And it's a piece of spalted white birch.
I love it. That's really creative.
And that tip I left, I had to do that by hand.
You mean you didn't turn it off center again? I'm shocked.
I did.
Jeez, Doug.
But I'm wondering, how do you get the oil in?
Well, that's still in. It's not.
That's cool.
I didn't get that out.
It's tree oil.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Is the top of the log flat, or does it have a slight depression?
It has a slight depression, because if you go back to the first, it had that's why I couldn't get it centered, there was a branch coming off of that, like a Y when I started.
Mhm.
So I kept turning it and kept turning that Y off, but I wanted to leave as much of that on the outside. So I left a impression. I set it down, yeah, the oil can down in further.
So is that cut through essentially on around the pith, and the oil can is on the pith?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Tree in one oil. That's right.
3-in-1 oil, yep.
There you go. Awesome. Any other comments for Ben?
Nice work.
Good job.
Amazing.
So this one's mine. I actually, it doesn't show up very well on the picture. I've got two pictures here, but actually I've made a cube inside a sphere. That's freestanding cube. What can you say? It's just a cube inside a sphere.
So Doug, did you drill the 6, I'm assuming it's got what, 6 holes?
Yeah.
Did you drill that when it was still a square blank?
No, I made the spheres first, and then I drilled the holes. I think it probably, on reflection, Janine, I probably would do it better if I'd done the holes for the blank first. I used my Forstner. It's an 1.25 inch hole, and I just used my Forstner bit to go down the depth that I wanted the square to be. So I start with, and then I had to hold it between. I couldn't hold it between centers because the you can't hold it onto, and none of the grips I have from the chuck for the lathe were the right size. So I had to use a clamping device that, it's 2 circles clamped together, sort of almost like a force fit or a,
Jam chuck.
jam, almost like well, it's not a jam chuck, but you guys have seen this type of chuck before that I used and cleaned it out. And then for the final little bit, getting the corners off, I carved those out by hand, because if you let that loose, that cube loose, I've made some of these where it was the other way around, where I put a sphere inside a cube, and I tried letting the sphere loose on the lathe while I was turning, and the whole thing blew up, because as soon as you let it go, it obviously goes off center on the inside part, and then it just explodes the outside. So you really can't. Well, maybe you can, but I haven't figured out the strategy for completely getting the cube free on the lathe. In future, if I stuffed it up so that it wouldn't break out, it might be okay. But anyway.
Wow.
That was a bit of fun.
Doug, when you drill into it,
Yeah.
are you drilling perpendicular to one of the cube's facets, or are you
Yes.
drilling corner?
Perpendicular to the cube facet.
And then what do you use, like a little rotary tool to grind it free?
Well, what I did is then use my hollow forming tools to get down, so to make the facet as big as possible. And so by the time you're finished on the lathe, the 6 facets can all be seen, and it's only being held in the inside of the ball by the corner of the cube. So there's 8 points of contact inside, and then I just used a little, not a rotary tool, just a hand tools I have, but you could use a rotary grinder or a Dremel if you can reach in far enough. The problem is reaching in under that, the holes aren't that big, so getting in and around the corner. Because if you can imagine, let me see if I can show. If you can see the point that's between those 3, on this one, that's between the 3 holes, is actually where the corner is. So it's actually you're carving at the furthest possible point from any one of the holes.
Right.
Okay, what is the diameter of the ball?
It's a 4-inch ball, and the cube on the inside is a 1 3/4 inch square, or 1 3/4 inch cube.
Great idea.
Very interesting.
Thank you. That's all the pictures I received that I found. Does anybody else have something they'd like to share
Yeah,
I
mine's
do.
the one that was, that went AWOL like I did last October.
Okay. Do you have it? Do you have it with you?
I do.
So I'm gonna go back. I assume you've stopped sharing on mine, right? Okay.
Yeah.
There. That's the one I was looking for.
Yeah, this is willingly captivated. My heart is in wood and it's in the shape of a turn bowl. So willingly captivated by turning wood.
Cool.
Let's see there.
Are you giving that away as a Valentine's gift?
It's a good idea. The trouble is my wife isn't captivated by work in the wood. She's captivated by the end product.
Very nice.
This segment is sponsored by Swanson's Dry Cleaning. Where you can get
All right, I have a couple. I wasn't able to send pictures in because our shop was locked. I couldn't get done what I wanted to get done. This is one I showed a while back. There was a picture on the back cover of one of the AAW magazines. And I don't remember who it was, but I think it was Jason Clark. He had a basket weave platter. And on the one side, he had a pattern, and then a different pattern on the opposite side. But when you turn it, then the circles go on the top and the loops go on the bottom.
Oh,
And he had a whole platter with a basket weave with the heart shapes on one side and I don't know what it was, scallops on the other side. And when he turned it, the patterns went to the back and the front. So I did this quite a while ago. So then that worldwide, this is a piece of walnut about 2 inches thick, black walnut, and about 12 inches in diameter.
So how do you keep them together? They're obviously stuck together somehow. Does it come out?
One piece of wood, and they're not going to come apart. They never came apart. What I did, I have a real thin parting tool made out of a saw blade. Well, I ground that even narrower, very narrow and very shallow height on it, and went in at an angle, 45-degree angle on each side to cut it free.
Okay.
And so Woodworkers Worldwide was on a couple months back. I don't know if some of you saw that. Jason Clark was on there, and he did a Saturn bowl. So that's what I was working on yesterday and today after I get back into the shop. And here's my Saturn bowl. The outer ring shattered and flew off and broke into 6 pieces. I put it together so you could see it, but the bowl turns inside of the ring, and then the bowl itself will turn inside the other center plate.
That's cool.
That is nice.
It's done with the narrow parting tool cutting in on each side to cut it free.
And Ron, did you do your cutting in that way after you did the hollowing out on both of those pieces?
Yeah, it was totally done, sanded, finished, everything ready to go, and then I cut it. To cut this big ring, you need a special jig that goes in over and picks up like my fingers are.
Yeah, over the ball.
And you cut on the outside of that jig.
Right.
And it has to, of course, it has to allow for the bowl, the bulge of the bowl. So it has to sit over top of the bowl. So I think the idea of the glue, when you get down to such a narrow, this is only less than a 1/4 inch wide, and the glue up joints, there's not enough to hold them together. He did it with a solid piece, and something like this walnut, about 1 3/4. You could do that. And I have a lot of this walnut, but it doesn't have much of a pattern, so you wouldn't be able to see the shape when it goes around. That's why I did the carving. I carved this with my little reciprocating carver that I had just bought. And then I painted white paint into the rings, and then tight bond glue and some gold glitter that I put in the rings. So anyway, that was my Captivated bowl in the ring.
Ron, have you thought about using some packing, the cellophane packing tape around the outside of your segmented section before trying to part it off? Just because that packing tape really holds delicate stuff together, and that way when it finally parted, it wouldn't fly apart like you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
one that
I don't know what happened. I may have gotten it at the wrong angle or the wrong, different
Yeah.
radius inside and outside and cut it apart. I'm not quite sure, but
I was just thinking that if you had some reinforcing on the outside of it, when you were just you could remove some temporary reinforcing on the outside of your dish as you're cutting that V into it. It might have had better luck holding together. That's all.
yeah, yeah. Well, the next one I'll make a little thicker too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do another one.
So are you going to do another one next month so that you can for the duplication challenge you can make two precisely the same?
Yeah, there you go.
Doug, Mark and I have a contribution to this.
Do you? What do you got?
Well, it's a very loose interpretation.
How's that loose?
But
It looks tight to me.
It's one of my favorite pieces.
Wow.
One of my favorite pieces, and Mark does the
Okay.
layup. Yes, sorry, Mark. Mark does the pieces for me.
Is that what kind of wood are the pieces of cross wood or are they metal?
It's walnut and maple.
Okay.
You know, he doesn't like me around sharp saws and moving instruments like that.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then this is another piece that we made.
Oh, that's cool.
I actually made a set of these for wedding present for friends of ours.
Cool.
It's really nice.
I love the contrast.
Yeah. So, thank you for letting us play show and tell.
That
Cool.
square.
Thank you.
That square
Thank you.
that you showed there, you have one, you cut on one angle with inserts in it. If you rotate it 90 degrees and do another cut, you'll get pieces that'll cross and you'll get quite a pattern when you turn them.
Celtic knot, yeah.
I did a lot of eggs with that a couple years back.
I actually did one a while ago in which I used, instead of another type of wood, I used copper between the wood to do it. And so the metal went all the way through. And people say, well, it'll dull your tool, but it didn't actually dull it that much. It was quite
How'd you
interesting.
glue it together, Doug? You use
Just super glue. Just super glue.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's still together. Anybody else got anything for us?
I had a question for Judy. So Judy, when you were laying out the maple inserts, were the angles intentional?
Mark,
Is
yeah,
that
yes.
they're not both at the same angle? So was that difference in angle intentional?
Yes.
And how did you decide what
Yeah.
angles to use?
I think we just,
Just
Eyeballed it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I eyeballed it.
It's really pleasing. I think those two angles are complementary.
Thank you.
So we want to try it with some different woods and somewhat different shapes now, but as I say, it's one of my favorite pieces that I've turned.
Is that maple a thick veneer?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you over the dog.
Where's the grain direction in the maple, the lighter wood?
Mark?
Yeah, it's cross grained to the walnut.
Okay.
So the walnut, the grain is running vertically in the piece, and in the maple, it's just some pieces from a maple tree that came down here. So
It's like a thick veneer, a thick.
yeah, it's just like an 1/8 inch thick piece. It's probably the thinnest piece I could get through the planer.
Cool. Great. Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.